Well, hello, friends. Good evening. Welcome to the Seven Pillars Talk Show with your host, Teresa Poor, founder of Unbreakable Life. And why is this called the Seven Pillars Talk Show? Well, just as a reminder, when we are creating our unbreakable life, it takes pillars, things that we can hold on to help us get from a place of really what I'd like to call imposter syndrome into authentic confidence. And those pillars that we choose to grasp onto with the Seven Pillars Talk Show, number one, our self discovery. Number two is our mindset and mind shifting. Three is our beliefs. Four is those defining moments and trauma moments that lead us on a trajectory. Five is our health. Six is our community, and that's what you're part of right now. And seven, identifying, discovering, and walking in your purpose. Well, tonight we are going to be sharing a beautiful story, really one of those moments where God can bring beauty from ashes with my special guest. I am so excited that the Seven Pillars Talk Show has allowed me to meet women from across the world, and connections can be made. And I met this beautiful woman. Her name is Sue Boyles. I met her through this mutual networking group that we're in with speakers around the world that are out there sharing their story. And really and truly, your story, just like Sue's, just like mine, becomes somebody else's key to freedom. And that's what we're going to hear about tonight as we introduce Sue to this group. So without further ado, I'm going to bring my new friend Sue on, and we're going to learn a lot about her story, what she has chosen to do with her story to make an impact in lives around the world, and how you, of course, can partner with her in that journey. So let's welcome Miss Sue to the stage. Hey there.
Hey, thanks for having me, Teresa. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too, Sue. Welcome. Now, I would love for you to just start out with, a little bit about yourself, where you're from. Maybe you'd have to see some beautiful pictures in the background over there. Let's let the audience get a chance to know the Sue in you for a moment.
Sure. Well, like she said, my name is Sue Bowles. I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio. I now live in Central Ohio, outside of Columbus, and I'm a master certified life coach and international speaker and all that stuff that we'll get into. The pictures behind me, these are very special ones. This one over here, this is my dad. My dad and I were insanely close. Dad passed December 27th, 2022, 2 days after Christmas. So that Christmas season was pretty rough for about a year and a half there. And then over here, this is my mom. She passed in October 2020. And that's my brother Scott, who lives with me, and then me. And then in addition to that, I have an older sister, an older brother, and another younger brother as well. So there's five of
Wow.
us kids. There's another brother who passed away when he was 2 years old. I've not yet met him. I'll meet him when I get to meet Jesus. So,
Yeah.
and just I love my family. I was mom's caregiver for the last 8 years of her life. Biggest honor. Didn't have, not without its challenges, but biggest honor. And I miss them both very, very much. So that's
Yeah.
become one of the stories, one of the chapters of the story lately is who am I now? And
Yeah.
and it's been a neat evolution to see. So
Oh, I love that. I love that you honor their legacy.
oh yeah.
And probably every time somebody gets to meet you, they get to meet mom and dad too.
They yeah, my I have the honor of being my parents' legacy.
Yeah.
And it's nothing I take lightly. A lot of the things you'll hear me talk about tonight, a lot of the lessons I've learned and the character that has developed and the attitude that I've developed and grown come
Mm.
from my parents and the what things I saw them live through, but not
Yeah.
even live through, but survive and thrive afterwards. And the attitude and how they continue to get to the other side of it is now what I live as well.
Oh, I think that's beautiful, Sue. I recently did a talk for an organization, and it was one of their national conferences, and it was so fun. And I shared with them the story of the how to train a flea. And I don't know if you've heard of that
I don't
story.
think I have.
Well, we're not trying to train fleas. In fact, if I'm trying to train them, I want them out of my house. However, there was a science experiment that was done that really relates to this a little bit. And that experiment said that if you literally put fleas in this jar and close the lid, After 3 days, the jar will be reopened, and the fleas will maintain the patterns, the behaviors, and the lifestyle that they adapted to during that 3-day period for the rest of their lives. And a lot of times we adapt to situations that really and truly they can be wonderful situations because your parents passed down that legacy of how to overcome things, how to leap further, or we can pick up, challenging situations and pass that down in generation as well. And I think, you said a couple of things with you being part of their legacy that will continue on. And of course, it'll continue through you and then beyond you. But then also, you said something, you used the word evolution. And I love that because as we go through life, God will allow us to go on different journeys, right? And we evolve as we pick up what we need to pick up from this piece, and then we move on and we pick up what we need to pick up from that piece, and we move on. And I think we'll see a lot of that interwoven into your story. And I know you've got your story out there for the world to see because you have an Amazon published 2 books at this point. Yeah.
2 books, third one coming in October.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Congratulations. Now, have you always been a writer?
I have been, and I didn't know it. So I love to write. I've always loved to write. And when it got to the point in my healing journey where I started writing my book, I didn't realize I was an author as well. Because you can write and not be an author, but I discovered that I was an author as well. So that was a big challenge and a joy. And then the second book is part of an anthology I'm part of. And the first volume came out in January, went bestseller, Amazon bestseller in 2 categories. And then I'm also part of volume 2 of that same series. And that's what comes out in October. So I'm super excited for those opportunities.
That is so, so cool. And I think, I've learned through a lot of hardships and a lot of, tough things on myself that our stories can do one or 2 things. They can either hold us back and chain us down, or literally they can be the keys to somebody else's freedom. And when we choose to boldly go out and share those stories with the world, whether we're doing it through online platforms like this or speaking engagements or your book, you're truly giving somebody else those keys. So, sorry, I had somebody come in for a minute. Yeah. So, I would love for you to talk about, you mentioned your healing journey, and I feel like there's a lot of people who need a healing journey. We go through life and we get wounded here and wounded there, and we walk around wounded. We may, consciously forget about things, but that wound is still playing in our subconscious mind, constantly dictating our patterns, our beliefs, our mindset. Tell us how, if you want, you can definitely share your story, but tell us about your healing journey. I think people would be so inspired by that.
Sure. One way to sum it all up is you can run, but you cannot hide. And I ran for the longest time. I'll share a snippet of it because that will put into greater context the journey itself. Just briefly, and just to back up, my first book is called This Much I Know, the Space Between, and you can get that on my website. And it tells my story in much more detail. And it also goes into much more detail about the healing journey that God took me on. So what I'm going to share is just like that much of what's inside the book. So, so having said that, I am a childhood rape survivor. I was raped by a classmate when I was 7 years old, first grade, after school one day. And my perpetrator's last words to me were, "Don't tell anybody." And unfortunately, I bought that lie. And I didn't tell anyone for 15 years until my senior year of college, a couple months before I graduated. Now, between age 7 and 18, 22, there's a whole lot of life in between there. Think of what your life was like. Whoever's listening to the show, think of what your life was like in middle school, high school, college, first dates, first job, all those things. All that happened while I was hiding from my secret, while I was hiding my secret is a better way to say it. So in between that, there were other sexual abuses that happened from some neighborhood kids. There was my parents divorced after 34 years of marriage. That's long after this, but that has informed part of my story as well. My dad was an alcoholic, and went into recovery, but the alcoholism was just really starting to show itself in high school and college. So all those times, and has had a dysfunctional home that I was growing up in, and ended up that I developed an eating disorder. So I'm now in recovery from an eating disorder. But when I went to college, my eating disorder really kicked in. If you think about it, trauma literally rewires your brain. It is a scientifically proven fact. It changes how your brain processes things, and how the mapping, the neuroscience of your brain, of how it interprets things. So I started off course at a very young age, at a very formative age. And the
Mm.
longer you're off course, the farther away from home you get. So by the time I was 22, I'd gone through all of that young life development, that adolescent time, middle school, high school, college, when your brain is really developing, when you're starting to learn how to think for yourself and make judgments and draw boundaries and communicate and all those things. And I was off course,
Right.
insanely off course. So by the time I got to 22, when ended up being my dean of students, in between there, I was one messed up college kid. And I was looking for attention. And the way I described it was, if I stayed busy, I didn't have to think.
Yeah.
I didn't have to think, I didn't have to feel. And if I didn't have to feel, I didn't have to deal with my stuff. So you name it, I was involved in it,
Mm.
over and beyond. So I don't, I want to jump to the healing part, but you can't understand the healing if you don't understand a little bit of the woundedness. In
Sure.
between
Absolutely.
there was twice that I considered ending my life.
Wow.
I dabbled in cutting at one point. So many different things, to give you a small snippet of it. Where the healing journey started is we're coming up on 10 years. And I say 10 years, but it's only been 10 years to see where I was and where I am now.
Wow.
Where I was I was imploding. In
Mm.
2014, I back up. This is July 10th, 2024. 19 years ago today, a very dear friend of mine passed away. She was my pastor's wife. I was still grieving her as if it was yesterday, 3 years after her passing.
Wow.
So that, though, was the catalyst for starting the healing, because my eating disorder red flags were starting to come up. So my pastor got me connected with a counselor named Amanda with Grace Recovery Counseling in South Carolina. I just was with her an hour and a half ago online. I'm still with her now. And we started going to work. It took us 6 years of working together to, as she said, get me stronger in the present before we could go deal with the past. I didn't know
Mm.
what a boundary was. I was letting myself be walked over. I didn't know how to communicate. All these things that you learn, middle school, high school, college, I didn't know. I had to learn that.
Right.
So 2014 rolls around, a movie comes out, movie called Ragamuffin comes out, based on the life of the late Christian musician Rich Mullins. One of my favorite quotes of Rich's is right over my head, and it feeds so well into this. It's not going to matter if you have a few scars. It will matter if you didn't live. So,
Mm.
yeah, isn't that rich in more ways than one?
Yeah.
So 2014, I'm dealing with the rape for the first time. I'd seen this movie earlier on. My brother had to serve 18 months in prison for a drunk driving accident he took responsibility for. He got out in August of 2014. Ran into somebody in town. And he said, "Man, I haven't seen you for a while. Where you been?" And he says, "In prison." And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm struggling with my authenticity. I'm struggling with my confidence. I'm struggling with being real, because
Right.
I was in denial about my story. And my brother's in town very boldly saying, this is where I was. And that
Mm.
really convicted me. You're talking earlier about how a story can affect somebody else's. That affected mine.
Wow. Yeah.
Because it led me to look at my counselor and say, I just want to be authentic. I went
Right.
to a retreat called just now called the Walking Stick Retreats. That is where the healing started. The
Mm.
first year I had to own my story because I was in denial about it. The second year I had to grieve my story because there's a lot of loss in my story, and every loss is worthy of being grieved.
Yeah.
And the
Absolutely.
third year, the nugget I walked away with is that I am valuable to God. And
Mm.
when I started to dare to believe that to be true, that's when things started to happen. That's when the book started. That's when the speaking started. So
Yeah.
when I say only 10 years, I hope that paints a little bit of a picture of where I was versus where I am in just those 10 years.
Yeah.
That is the power of what God can do.
Wow. So many things that could be unpacked with that. Number one, thank you for your boldness to share. I think so many people can resonate with that story simply because of the horrifying fact that 1 out of 3 women will be victims of sexual abuse, and 1 out of 9 men will be victims of
Mhm,
sexual abuse. It is a horrific number.
mhm,
And so many people will carry that shame. And like you talked about, we try to mask it with so many things. We try to overcome it or overcompensate. It's like any kind of wound that we have. If our hip starts going out, we're going to try to use every other piece of our
mhm.
body to overcompensate for it, right?
Yep.
And instead of perhaps dealing with the hip, which could fix the whole problem. But yeah, I think that that is beautiful. And I love the story about your brother. I think that, God's funny way of using situations for us to kind of see things through somebody else's story. I was on a podcast earlier today, and one of the things that we talked about, of course, is the Bible is full of stories. It's full of
Mhm,
stories. Unfortunately, most people don't have a chance to review it because they choose not to read it for the stories, because of different reasons. But it gives us every opportunity to see redemption, power, and grace.
mhm,
And one of the things that I love, another thing I love about your story is when you said, I dared to believe that, what
mhm.
did you say, that God could,
That I was valuable to God.
valuable to God. And I think being a survivor myself and having somebody extremely close to me who I wish I could take that pain away from, also being a survivor,
Mhm.
I know that sexual trauma goes straight to identity. And it makes us, especially if we're rooted in a foundation in Christ, or even if we're not, it
Mhm.
makes us doubt our value, and our worthiness. And can you talk a little bit more about that piece?
Yeah, the daring to believe that I'm that part of things.
Yes.
Yeah. So the retreat the third year was talking about the kingdom of God is. We were talking about the different parables. And the one that really stuck to me was about the pearl of great price and talking about how there's a pearl of great price that Jesus goes looking for. And that I realized that I am that pearl of great price. I am valuable to God.
Mm,
And I had never owned that before. I never really heard, you might hear it, but
right.
not in a way that really resonates with you. And the teachings that whole weekend and small group work and just everything just really resonated. Because you got to remember, for the 2 years leading up to this, God was breaking up all the fallow ground and just really starting to dig at some roots.
Right.
So that was when that year also 2016 was the year I entered recovery from my eating disorder. My Because we had been dealing with the rape in 2014 and in 2015, and I'd started writing the book in 2015. um, I had my eating disorder was starting to flare again,
Mm,
and my counselor a number of times had asked me in the past about, you know, getting a dietitian on the team, and I'd always fought it. And this time she was not letting up. We're talking like over a course of 5 or 6 weeks, she's asking and saying it and saying it and saying it again. And I finally relented and said, "Is it really that bad, Amanda?" And she said, "Yes, Sue, it is. I know how much it will help." So I got a dietitian involved. So that was in July of 2016. And what's cool is that November, my first Thanksgiving. So think of someone with an eating disorder, learning how to eat really balanced for the first time,
right.
having to deal with all the emotions because eating disorders and emotions are enemies, and they
Right.
have to learn how. Recovering from an eating disorder means you have to face the issue. I cannot not eat if I want to live.
Right.
Eating disorders are an addiction.
Mm,
The way they are unlike other addictions is other addictions you avoid the issue to survive. Eating
Mm.
disorder, I have to face that issue to survive.
Right, right,
So
right.
here we are at Thanksgiving 2016, and it was a train wreck of a year here. Got all this stuff swirling through my head. I was part of an online volunteer team for an eating disorder support group online, and we were taking turns, shifts, supporting other people. So here I am struggling insanely, texting my dietitian the same day, and to the point she's calling me at one point, and yet I'm offering help and support to other people.
Mm.
Many people would say that would be hypocritical.
Mm.
But here's the thing. People who say it's hypocritical are believing the lie that you have to have it all figured out before you can help somebody.
Mhm.
And that nugget of I am valuable to God was being played out there because I realized that I was able to start helping somebody else as I figured it out. And
And how
that's
dangerous that lie is, because it will literally keep people stalled out from help. And one of the biggest things that we can do to grow is to feed somebody else.
right, right.
Wow.
You know, our when our mind is not thinking right, trauma
Mm.
rewires it, we're believing all the lies. Part of recovery, part of healing is getting the story straight.
Yeah.
We are telling ourselves stories, and we are telling ourselves lies in that story. And
Mm.
one of those lies is that we aren't valuable, that
Mm.
nobody cares, that I'm a hypocrite because I'm trying to help somebody else when I don't have my own life together, that nothing's ever going to work for me. It's too late for me. I'm too screwed up, too far gone, a total waste of space. That's what I was believing in 2014 when I walked into that retreat that first year. I
Wow.
called myself the holy exception. I was actually believing the lie that everything in the Bible was good enough for everybody else but me. That
But me.
lie had me trapped until I started serving, until I started helping at this group. So that
Mm.
nugget of I am valuable, that's where it started taking root, starting to grow. I had been
Mm.
writing the book, but then I was putting wheels to it. And it fell right in line with something my pastor had spoken on the previous year. He had talked about growth. He said, "What's it take to help somebody else?"
Mm.
And his answer was, "You only have to be a step ahead."
One step.
And that is actually one of the inputs to my company name of My Step Ahead, and our focus of you only have to be a step ahead to help the person behind you. It all started with that nugget, believing that I'm valuable, that I have something to offer, that I don't have to have it all figured out. And
Yeah.
that has blossomed into the Dare to Believe movement now, all based on challenging people with how they answer the question, do I believe that I matter? Not
Wow.
does somebody else believe it. What do I believe about myself?
Sure. Wow. How profound. And I want to ask you a question about that, because I'm a person of faith. My viewers know that. Obviously, you are. What do you think your life would have looked like had you not received that nugget from that sermon from your pastor?
Wow. Great question. I think at that point, I still would have been floundering and hoping that something might change.
Yeah.
But because I had this thing about writing the book, and that started, and then it kind of fed in because then he had his thing. And I remembered a conversation I had from somebody else back in the 90s and how it all started shaping together. And then how that led to the book, and how the book changed with what the original plan for it was. Where
Mm.
would I be without that nugget? I think back at that time, I still would have been floundering and looking for a purpose,
Yeah.
looking for a reason to go on, quite frankly. Because
Wow.
if it was only gonna be about me, I could have chucked that chapter a long time ago.
And isn't that profound? I think sometimes we despise the journey of healing
Mhm.
because it's hard. You know, facing demons is hard. Looking at ourselves in the mirror when maybe we've glanced in the mirror, but we've never forced ourselves to like so many people, I bet, Sue, don't even look at their own eyes.
Right.
you know? And and I think about that. I remember one time in my healing journey, I looked in my eyes and I thought, huh, there's more depth in there than I've ever given credit to.
One of the hardest and most profound homework assignments my counselor gave me when we were dealing with the rape. Because again, when we were dealing with that, obviously everything's getting stirred. Think of any survivor in therapy, in treatment, in healing to deal with something currently has a torrent and beyond of emotions.
Right.
Add about 4 decades to that.
Yeah.
So that's why we had to dig through so much to start getting to where we could get to the deeper root. So when we got to the point, so all that to say that I was attributing thoughts, I was judging myself and my actions that day with an adult mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not being fair to 7-year-old Sue
Right.
because I was judging a 7-year-old with a 50-year-old mindset.
That is so, so true. When I had to do the same thing and face my story, unfortunately, I didn't have a therapist walk me through it. I probably should have, probably should have. But I remember a question that the Holy Spirit dropped on me, and that was, Teresa, like literally, so, so specific. Would you hold your 13-year-old child hostage
Mhm.
to the situation that happened at age 13? And my answer was, of course I wouldn't. So then the next question was, then why are you doing it to yourself?
Ouch. And that, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
What I ended up, what Amanda's my counselor, what she gave me the homework to do was 10 times a day for a week. So 70 times. Look in the mirror. You're talking about looking in your eyes. Look in the mirror and say out loud, the rape was not my fault.
Yeah.
And at first it was, the rape was not my fault. The rape was not my fault. It's a whole deal just to make it, just because I was supposed to do it. So I did. I was a good little girl. I did my homework. And after about the second, maybe third day, I started to believe it. And it started to become, the rape was not my fault. The rape was not my fault. The rape was not my fault. And I started putting emphasis on different words. So,
Mm,
and I started to believe it. That
mm,
was the powerful thing, is it started, we were correcting the story chapter.
yes.
So when I got back to see her the next week, she asked how, well, it was all right. Say it to me. I'm like, oh man, come on, Amanda. She said, say it to me. So I did. She said, say it again. And it was so insanely powerful. So yes, when we look at ourselves in the eyes, it's a
Mm,
whole different ballgame because we know what's behind those eyes.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's so good. So, so good. I feel like so many people will be blessed from hearing this. I am fortunate that I have a big community around me. And you're fortunate that you were able to find community around you, whether
Mhm.
you created the community or by happenstance. I don't know. You know that piece of the story. But I feel like over the last 5 years, community was rapidly and then slowly and then continually stripped away from people. And as they are asking themselves the same two questions that we have asked the human race for the existence of time: who am I and why am I here?
Mhm.
Right? Who
Mhm.
am I and why am I here? Those two questions that have been around forever. Without community, can you discover those things?
Mm. You might be able to discover, but living it out and
Mm,
living it in its fullest, no. Yeah, I could sit here and say I know who I am now because I've been in so much therapy with Amanda. I've got all that figured out. I got the corner market on myself. That's nice.
yeah,
Yada da, you know?
yeah,
What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do with it? Because it's not enough to just have something figured out. Not that any of us ever have everything figured out. But it's
right,
not enough just to come to that mental assent.
right.
What are you going to do with it? It's like
What
going to college, getting a degree, and deciding you're doing nothing with it.
right,
What are you doing with the education that you have experienced? Life education.
right,
Nothing can be wasted.
right.
Nothing is wasted because there is a greater purpose and a greater good that can come from immense, ugly, horrible things.
Mm.
I'm not saying that what happened to me was good. It wasn't. But I do know my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ can turn good out of it.
Absolutely.
Like speaking, like encouraging people, like writing books and getting the message in the hands of people I will never meet. Those are the ways that bad things can work together for the good.
I love that. And I think even with the therapist, you said her name was Angela?
Amanda.
Amanda, excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Amanda. You're probably going to watch this. But Amanda was part of your community.
Yes, she was.
And, without embracing one another, whether it's a community of support through coaching, like what you do, like what I do, or a therapist, or even a doctor, or even having that dean that you went to. I'm sorry, I'm probably messing that up as well.
Nope, you got that
But
right.
okay, good. But, having that person that you can go to, because I think one of the other dangerous lies that we pick up over time too, and is this doesn't happen to anybody else. You're the only one.
Holy exception.
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
And it is a lie. And
Mhm.
and it's when we strip it down, many times it comes down to the fear and the
Mhm.
shame. And those lies are being fed to us by that. We fear being found out, whatever that
Right.
means, because
Right.
we think we did something wrong. And therefore, that means that we're taking responsibility for something that probably has nothing to do with our ownership. So
Yeah.
right away, we're telling ourselves the story, it's my fault. I
Right.
still can't do it right. I've screwed up again because all I am is a screw up. And this time it's just a bigger one.
Right.
And you see how easily it twists? And those are the things that keep us stuck. Those are the things that keep us paralyzed. And going back to the question, until each person dares to believe that they matter and can answer that question in a positive bedrock way, the hard truth is that permanent life change cannot and will not happen. It's going to be
Right.
like a yo-yo. You might be better for a while, but it's going to come back and bite you again
Right.
until you draw the line in the sand and say, by golly, I'm going this way. And when it gets really hard and I don't know I want to do it before, my mooring is that I believe that I matter and I
Yeah.
want something more for myself and I'm going to do whatever it takes.
Amen. I
My,
love that.
my mantra with Amanda early on was a manageable level of tolerable existence is no longer an option.
Ah,
Because
I love
that's
it.
what I was living, and I wanted more.
That needs a hashtag. Like, wow. Wow. Golly, when I went through my healing journey, I used to think that I'm healing myself from my past. But what I had this epiphany on was, yes, I needed to heal my past, but it wasn't for the sake of my past. It was the sake of my future.
Yes.
The
Yes.
past is over. While we can look back and we can see it, I don't think it's there for us to look back and see so we can critique ourselves or hold ourselves in shame. Shame was a load we were never meant to carry. That's why it's so crushing,
Mhm,
and I look back and I think about that, and I used to think, well, this story created me, but really and truly, we get a choice every day. One of my favorite scriptures: His mercies are new
mhm,
every day. We have lungs, air in our lungs. We have the sun out. We're standing up. We have an opportunity to create a new thought, have a new thought pattern, but it takes help. It takes
mhm.
people that can lock arms with you a lot of times
Right.
for you to even have the belief. Like, I can't imagine what it would have been like had Amanda not helped you with that mantra, had she
Mhm,
not challenged you to look at yourself in the mirror and to make those bold declarations that it
mhm.
was not my fault, because the only way to get rid of that old programming is to replace it. But
I
what if
mean,
nobody plugs you into a
yeah,
source?
there's a phrase. I'm involved with a ministry down in Cincinnati called Grace Story Ministries. They have a women's conference and a men's conference. And the women's conference, for anyone interested, is the first weekend of November each year. and the men's is first weekend in May each year. So women's is coming up November, I think it's 1st and 2nd. So you can go to gracestoryministries.com. All that to say, Amber Jones leads that ministry. And she tells a story of how her counselor, her therapist, at one point in time looked at her and said, I will carry the load for you for now until you are strong enough to carry it for yourself.
Mm.
And that is what it's about. That community is, it can take any number of different forms.
Mm-hmm.
Mine started with Ed Highland, my dean of students in college, and I didn't even know it. He became my confidant. My senior year, he knew he had a college kid who wasn't ready for the workforce because I was still messed up. And he gave me homework. And one day, I didn't know a secret needed to come out. We're going over my homework. He asked me a question. I can't tell you the day what it was. I'm looking at his carpet and I'm like, well, when society tells you not to say anything, and my voice just trailed off. And Ed looked at me and said, Sue, did somebody hurt you? I said, yeah. I said, your parents? I said, no. Somebody else? Yeah. What happened? That's how my secret came out. I didn't know it needed to come out. All
Wow.
because Ed believed in me until I could believe in myself.
Wow.
See how that all comes around? Until I dared to believe that I mattered,
Right.
I was stuck in the cesspool.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get my story straight.
Wow. Wow. I applaud him. And you talked about that, that you matter and that you make a difference. Everybody matters. And
Every life matters.
and everybody is people, when I coach people to helping them discover their purpose a lot of times is attached to pain. Sometimes it's attached to pleasure, but every time it's attached to people. It has
Yes.
to be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would not be what our creator created us for. It wouldn't be,
Right.
And I think about that, Dean, and I think all of us have examples of that one person who showed us a new thought or did something or believed when nobody else would. We all have that. And thank you, Lord, that we do have that.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to be that for so many people, Sue. And I think that's beautiful. I would love for you to take some time and really talk people through, like, what does this look like for you now? You went through this horrible thing. You went through this healing. But as you said, it wasn't just for you, because if it were for you, you could have stopped a long time ago. You said it was for others. So will you talk about how you're using that story?
Yeah, thanks. Wow. And I think that's an important point, is that we choose what we want to do with our stories. And for me, it couldn't be just about me. There was too much going on that if it was just about me, I was already over me. I was pretty much already over me a long time ago. So where this is all led, we talked about a little bit. Can I show you the book covers real quick? I've got them right here. All right. So here's the first one. Let me get, there it is. This much I know, the space between. That's the first book.
So pretty.
So this is the second book, Breaking the Silence: Voices of Survivors, Volume 1.
Yeah.
So this is some of the way it plays out. And just before I go into more detail, to back up real quick, you're talking about the power of story and how it's not for somebody else. One of the reasons I became bold in sharing my story is because of Simone Biles. And I am praying that at some day I would have the chance to tell her in person, because when she came out with her story, it gave me permission to share mine. And that is the power of the individual work we do. We never know how it's going to influence somebody else.
Wow.
So how all this plays out now is, the books. Those are fun in and of themselves. I'm a master certified life coach. In a week, I take my exam for my ACC credential with the International Coaching Federation. So then I will have a global credential for coaching, which ICF, for those who aren't familiar, is the gold standard of coaching. And it takes about 5 different steps of training and everything to get them to take the exam. Anyway, so I'm super excited about that. I speak. I write, I do the podcasts. I love speaking in person at retreats, conferences, theme weeks. And in September, I'm up in Wisconsin as the closing keynote for Concordia University's Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Week. And the day before that, I'm doing an hour and a half training for their student leaders. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And so in addition to that, that's the big scale stuff. Excuse me. I love the one-on-one coaching. I love coaching my clients. I had 2 clients the other day back to back, and I got off and I'm just smiling and just seeing the success they are experiencing after
Mm,
even just a few sessions. I specialize with people who feel stuck, who
mhm,
don't know how to get where they want to go, who feel
mhm.
like their life has disqualified them from being able and worthy of
Right,
doing something, and I
right.
help them get on that path. And
Oh,
we
yeah.
find the little spot, the one spot where they're willing to take a risk.
Ah,
And then they capture the momentum. So
mm,
that I love that most. The coaching just really, because that keeps it about somebody else.
mhm.
I'm skilled with the advanced training that I have now to be able to help the person not look at the problem, but to grow themselves so they can manage the problem.
Yeah.
That's what I specialize in.
Oh, I love that. I love it, love it, love it. And, I think you mentioned when you're feeling stuck, I'll share real quickly what caused me to get to a place where I totally switched the trajectory of my life. And really, God did it. I was just obedient. Thank you that I had
Mhm,
that obedience there. But I remember there was a time in 2020 to 2021 where our businesses that we have, they were growing, they were doing okay, but there was like this wall. And it seemed like as soon as, I would start making a upward trajectory on one, boom, we would hit a wall or we would, and it was always, I would go to an event and I would get this hype from this event. And then I would come back and it was like all hell broke loose. Like,
uh-huh,
what
and the crash
happened?
came, yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
And I realized, sometimes those things happen as a divine attack. Sometimes those things happen to keep you from going on a trajectory because God's saying, I really have a different plan for you. I'm going to let you do your plan for a little while until you realize it's not really working out, right?
Uh-huh.
And and so I kept hitting that wall, Sue. And then finally, I remember being in my prayer room in my house, and I was like,
This
yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, I was in my prayer room and I was saying, God, why can't I hear your voice? And his answer to my spirit was, because you're listening to too many other voices.
Oh.
So I had literally made self-help books and audio books and the voice of my mentors and the voice of my parents and the voice of my husband and the voice of my past, all of these things became my guide. And when there's too many voices, you're spinning in circles. And so I took heed to that warning and got a tattoo that says be still on me, like slow down, Teresa, be
Mhm,
still. And that led me to a journey of hiring somebody like you, a life
mm,
coach. And let me tell you, that changed my life,
mhm,
literally changed my life. And I will say I was probably the worst customer for a while because I knew it all, because I read every self help
mhm,
book. I had done every time management course. I had, done the
mhm,
things, and I was stubborn and I was a businesswoman and, all the things. But after I finally like surrendered and submitted and learned to be still, we were able to discover that there were some limiting beliefs that I didn't know I
mhm,
had. There
mhm,
were some defining moments and trauma moments that I thought I could just push back and they really didn't have to control me. I didn't think about them all the time that I was aware of,
mhm. Key point.
but I was thinking about them all the time.
Mhm,
And one in particular was a sexual trauma situation that literally, you mentioned this earlier, found out. I lived for a very short period of time in a town of 800 people. And one of the things that we used to joke about during that town was everybody knows everything about you. In fact, they know how many sheets of toilet paper you use. Like it's that small of a
yeah.
town. And so in that adolescent identity forming years is about the time that the trauma happened. And I was in a place that I was constantly afraid that somebody would find out.
Mhm,
Right. And so that became that lie that repeated over and over and over in my head that, Teresa, you can only go so far. Because
mhm,
if you go so far with your success in these different areas of your life, what happens when somebody finds out? Boom, you'll lose all credibility. And again, it was something so simple looking back. I'm like, dude, like, no, I have a 16-year-old child. That's nonsense. And we tell our children that. I tell my, that's nonsense. We'll get over it. Right. But it's not nonsense when it's your own story.
Right.
And when you've been telling yourself that story for so long. So Sue, I go on to this to say, it's so important that we build community around ourselves and that we allow people that are experts, that are certified, that we can resonate with, and that we know are trusted people to work with. Now, I still wouldn't have gone around and told people at my church necessarily about it. I mean, I still had that survival mindset, right? But it was the trusted opportunity, the trusted time, and the desire that I finally had to surrender and say, okay, I trust you.
Right.
Which was a very hard thing for me to do. And I think most people with that sort of trauma, trusting others is hard.
Yeah. Because trusting people is what got you burned. Yeah. First of all, may I applaud you, Teresa, for the hard work and for even sticking with coaching so that once you peel back the layers, once you get past the defenses, you can start getting to the meat. And may I say, when you were putting all your trust in the outside sources, when you whittle it down, somewhere along the line, my guess is it translates to, I didn't believe I mattered. I didn't trust myself. So I didn't think that I had enough information. So I felt I had to go to somebody else because they were important. They mattered. I didn't.
Perhaps. You know, it's so crazy how we pick up those beliefs. And like I said, for the longest time, I didn't believe I even had limiting beliefs. I thought I was too positive to have a limiting belief.
And that belief was your limiting belief.
That was the limiting belief. Like, come on, Teresa, snap out of it. You know, it takes a village. And as I wrap this up, you know, what we do with the Unbreakable Life and the 7 Pillars and the 7 Pillars Talk Show, our goal is to make people aware that there are other people out there that have survived the same things, people that are, you know, that have discovered their purpose, people that are doing those things, and they're just like you, they're just like me. At one point, we didn't think we were worthy. At one point, we didn't think we were enough. At one point, we thought that that thing that was designed to tear us down was what broke us, and it wasn't. But we decided that we were worth it, and we took the step. And so anyway, Sue, I am so pleased to know you. And I will say this, spoiler alert, I don't know if you saw it on my Facebook page. However, next year, our theme for our conference, our Unbreakable Women's Conference, well, let me back up. Our theme for this year is the year she takes back her power.
Oh, I like that.
And that's what I feel like I did. And that's what I feel like you did when we released our chains and chose that, number one, we're going to start with me and then we can help others, right? We took back our power. Next year at Unbreakable Women's Conference, our theme is the year she discovers her purpose.
Those are great.
You have to take back your power before you can discover your purpose.
Right. Because just knowing a purpose without direction or reason or cause. Yeah.
Or worthiness.
Or worthiness, yes. Well, and I love what you said early on. You were talking about authentic confidence. You were introducing your 7 pillars. I want to make, before we wrap up here, make one little point here. And that is that you hear people talk about authenticity and vulnerability. It's very important to know that does not equate to airing all your dirty laundry.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because people can warp that out. I'm not being authentic because I haven't told this part of my story. There is wisdom involved in things.
Discernment.
And not everybody needs to know every little detail. It doesn't it's not supposed to be that way. That's where that power of community comes in, of having 1 or 2 trusted people. You could have a circle of 15 people. Not all 15 need to know it all.
Right.
Each relationship has a different role in your life, but it is important that somebody knows. That may just be a life coach, it may just be a counselor or
Mhm.
a social worker or your pastor or someone.
Mhm.
Someone needs to know,
Right.
not everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. I'm glad you covered that because, when we do our Unbreakable Women's conferences, we have 5 key speakers at each one, and they share their stories. And Sue, I'm telling you, at the end of each one, I've got people in my inbox saying, "I want to share my story." But
Mm,
I get to coach people through that process of sharing
mhm,
your story because our stories should always bring freedom to somebody. They
right.
shouldn't leave people feeling hurt or damaged.
Mhm,
And sometimes they need to put somebody in prison. Sometimes they do, you know, but sometimes it just needs to be what releases us from our prison.
right. Right. Very much so.
Yeah.
Can I share a resource I have for folks?
Please, yes,
Okay.
anything you
And
need,
and
yes.
and, and it goes right along that about getting people out of their prisons. So if people go to my website, SueBowles.com, and my name's spelled there, Bowles. You'll see a free PDF I have, and it's called Dare to Believe: Making Yesterday's Setback Tomorrow's Success. So I encourage you to go there. All you got to do is just send me your email address. It's an automatic thing right to your inbox. You can download it right there. It's a free PDF, and it goes through what I kind of some of the similar steps of healing, questions that God had me asking myself
Right.
to be able to start that transformative journey. And if you're not at the point of being able to take a step, there's other questions in there about, okay, well, so where am I with these different things? But it's
Mhm.
all about that transformation of helping you be able to take that next step of daring to believe that you matter, that your story matters, and that somebody else cares and wants to walk through the journey with you. And that
Mhm.
person is namely me. So if you don't know where to go, if you don't have anybody else, I am available to you. Go to my website, SueBowles.com. Send me a message through the contact form. It'd be my honor to walk with you. But go at least get that PDF to start.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Who wouldn't want to work with you? Like just the joy that you exude, Sue, and the joy in the midst of the pain. But I know that it required work. I know that
Mhm,
it required discipline. It required reframing,
mhm.
all the things. But how beautiful it is to see. How beautiful.
And what makes it beautiful is seeing the purpose in it now. How
Mm.
God brings beauty from ashes. My life verse is Psalm 70 Psalm 71 21 and 20 and 21. It says, though you have made me see troubles many and bitter, you will restore my life again. From the bottom of the depths, you will again bring me up. You will increase my honor and comfort me once again. I love the meat of those two verses.
Yeah.
And that's what we get to live out. You get to live it out. I get to live it out. And our purpose is to help other people discover how to live it out as well.
Amen. I love it. Well, Sue, thank you so much for being my honored guest
Thank
tonight.
you.
And it was just so wonderful to get to know you more and hear your story and to share that with the world around us. So, you will get to see more in the Unbreakable Life online program. So please jump onto that. Sue, I want you to jump into that online platform on
I
Facebook and
sure
share
will.
your contact information anytime. If you've got upcoming events coming or places or podcasts or things that you want to connect with people on, feel free and post that. They need to
Well, thank
hear
you.
and be connected with you. So,
That sounds great.
well, yeah, well, thank you so much. And to our guests and our viewers tonight, thank you for sharing your time with us. I hope that you found this meaningful and valuable and really some keys to freedom for yourselves because I promise you, my friends, you're worth it.
Yeah.
What your story has been is your